in a luxurious restaurant in the heart of Chicago, where the gentle clink of silverware on white porcelain was softer than a whisper. A seemingly harmless act completely changed a young woman's fate. Zara Quinn, a waitress, moved silently among tables draped in silk cloths, her eyes always downcast, her mouth only curving into a smile when necessary. She was like a shadow in the world of the elite, a place where no one truly saw her, until that night. While serving wine to a group of powerful guests at table number 1, her phone vibrated in her pocket. First, it was a text message, then an international call, the area code from China. Zara hesitated, but then answered the phone, and in fluent Mandarin, she whispered a few apologetic words to an old school friend for not being able to talk. Just a few sentences. But it was enough to make a man at the table look up. Leonard Quinn, the CEO of Quinn Group, the most powerful guest in the restaurant that evening, the man who was accustomed to everything before him being perfect and silent, suddenly paused his conversation, his gaze locked onto Zara as if he had just seen a secret being revealed. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, Zara stood before the towering glass skyscraper of Quinn Group, her hand clutching the business card Leonard had given her the night before. "I have a proposal for you. My office, 9 a.m. tomorrow." A part of her wanted to throw it in the trash, but her mother's hospital bills, over $12,000 a month, made it impossible for her to turn back. She stepped into the main lobby, her cheap blazer failing to hide the discrepancy between her and the people walking around, all of whom were impeccably dressed, elegant, and nothing like a girl who worked part-time in a restaurant. And then, as if fate were mocking her life, a security guard spoke up. "Your name matches our CEO's. Are you a relative?" Zara gave a faint, bitter smile. She had heard this question her whole life. Quinn was a common last name, and Leonard too far removed for her to believe there was any connection between them. But in her heart, a premonition began to form like an undercurrent she couldn't yet name. She didn't know that entering this building wasn't just about accepting a temporary job. It was about opening the door for secrets buried for 20 years to rise again. Secrets about a dead father, a convicted mother, and a corporation built on a perfectly constructed lie. The room was on the 59th floor of Quinn Tower, where the Chicago sky nearly touched every layer of transparent glass. Inside, everything was arranged as if in a movie, a long, ebony conference table, handcrafted leather-upholstered chairs, and a flawless white orchid in a vase at the center. Zara entered with palms slick with sweat, her heart pounding beneath her old blouse. At the far end of the table, Leonard Quinn stood with his back to her, gazing at the city. His charcoal grey suit fit his tall frame perfectly, every gesture exuding absolute control. When he turned around, his pale blue eyes were as sharp as tempered glass. "Ms. Quinn," he said, as if tasting the name. "You impressed me last night." Zara nodded slightly, cautious as if every word she spoke could make any opportunity vanish. You speak fluent Mandarin. And I'm not just talking about colloquialisms. He continued. You use technical terms. You understand finance. You understand cultural context. What did you study? Linguistics. Zara answered softly. I specialized in East Asian language families. But I dropped out in my final year because my mother has a heart condition. Leonard was silent for a beat. Then he gestured to a chair. Sit. I won't be long-winded. Zara sat down, keeping her back straight like a student before a blackboard. We are about to enter an extremely important round of negotiations with a Chinese tech corporation. This deal is worth billions of dollars and involves agreements for the production of semiconductor components for the American market. My lead interpreter, Mr. Chen, had a stroke yesterday. Professional interpretation agencies have been ruled out for security reasons. And then you appeared. Zara swallowed hard. Leonard leaned back in his chair, his hands clasped together. I want to hire you. Starting today. You will be trained for 1 week to prepare for the negotiations in Beijing next week. 2 weeks of work. $10,000. $5,000 now. $5,000 upon completion. Zara felt as if the wind were roaring through her eardrums. $10,000. Almost a month's worth of treatment for her mother. 1 more month of life. And the conditions, she asked softly. Leonard smiled. For the first time since she had walked in, loyalty, absolute confidentiality, and time. He handed her a thick stack of technical documents. You must be prepared to understand all of this within 5 days. Zara looked down, taking the contract with trembling hands. She knew it clearly. This wasn't just a job. This was a gamble, and she had no idea what she was betting. And Leonard hesitated for a second. If you do well, we will consider a long-term position in the corporation's international communications department. A real job, a real future. She hadn't dared to dream of that for years. Zara took a deep breath, then said, I accept. She had no idea that this nod was the ticket that would lead her into the center of a maze, a place where loyalty, family, and truth were distorted by power and the shadows of the past. Zara left the Quinn Group building with a heavy stack of documents and an even heavier mind. In her pocket was a check for $5,000. In her head were hundreds of technical terms in Chinese that she would have to memorize in just a few days. She arrived home as the clock neared 8 p.m. Her mother, Helen Quinn, was still at the hospital. In the small apartment, there was only an empty chair and old photographs pinned all over the wall, memories of a family no longer whole. Zara placed the check on the table, and before she could even exhale, her phone vibrated. The caller ID Dr. Knox. This man wasn't just her mother's doctor, he was the one who held her mother's survival in his hands. Because the heart medications Helen was using were all experimental, not covered by insurance. And only Dr. Knox, the director of clinical research, had the authority to continue or stop the treatment. Zara, his voice came through flat, cold. without a hint of friendliness. "I was informed that you just accepted a new job." Zara froze. "How did you know we have people in the Quinn system? And I also know you just received a rather generous payment." "Congratulations." His tone made Zara feel as if she had just signed a contract without reading the fine print. "Get to the point," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Why are you calling? To remind you of an old agreement. Do you remember why your mother was placed on the priority list for expensive experimental drugs?" Despite having no insurance or funding, Zara's throat tightened. Although she had suspected, hearing him say it outright made a nameless anger well up inside her. "I thought it was out of your kindness." "Kindness, doctor?" Knox let out a dry laugh. "I don't work for kindness, Zara. I work for benefits. And right now, my benefit is information." "What information about Quinn Group? About what goes on inside?" "You've just been placed in a very sensitive position. I want you to report everything to me related to the deal Quinn is negotiating with China. Transactions, contracts, meetings, anything of note." "This is corporate espionage," Zara said coldly. "No, this is a fair exchange." He cut her off. "Your mother's life, in exchange for a few files of information." Zara bit her lip hard. The silence stretched on. Her heart felt as if it were suspended between two levels of morality. "And if I refuse, the treatment will be discontinued. The risk of death increases by 80% if she goes without the medication for 48 hours. And right now, the next dose will be administered if I press confirm on my system right now." She sank into her chair, powerless, furious, and backed into a corner. "I can't give you the company's confidential information," she said softly. "I just started." "Then remember this: every day that goes by that I don't receive an update from you is another day your mother gets closer to the intensive care unit." He hung up. Zara sat there, stunned. The phone fell from her hand. She had gone from being a pawn to a chess piece, a piece being played by forces she did not choose, yet could not escape. She looked at the check on the table. In a matter of hours, it had transformed from hope to shackles. 2 days later, Zara stood before the Quinn Group headquarters with a small backpack, her hair in a neat bun, and her face made up just enough to hide the sleepless nights. Inside her bag was a voice recorder, a Chinese-English technical dictionary, a few protein bars, and a separate phone, what Dr. Knox called a secure communication channel. She knew it clearly. Stepping inside this building wasn't simply going to work. It was stepping into the middle of a battle where she didn't know which side she was on. On the 47th floor, the International Communications area, a man was waiting. Tall, thin, sharply dressed, his face as stern as a military judge. Zara Quinn, his voice was deep, devoid of expression. "Yes, I am Mason Blake, Project Coordinator for Liang Tech. I will be overseeing your work during the preparation for the negotiations." Zara nodded. This man, he was Leonard Quinn's right hand, according to the rumors, and someone everyone in the company was wary of. He handed her an access card, access level restricted. But when Zara tried to swipe it at meeting room number 3, where she was assigned to study the documents, the light turned green. She glanced at it quickly. Strange. Why would a restricted card have access to the project's data repository? Inside the room was a laptop, dozens of printed documents, and a camera mounted on the ceiling, aimed directly at her seat. Zara cautiously closed the door, then approached the desk. On the screen was a copy of the Technology Partnership Agreement between Quinn Group and Liang Tech, the largest Chinese corporation in semiconductors and military AI. She began to read. Financial terms, technology transfer clauses, global supply chains. Everything was written bilingually, English and Chinese. But what sent a chill down her spine were the small notes at the bottom of each page, mismatched translations, subtle numerical errors, enough to create significant legal misunderstandings. Immediately, Zara opened her personal laptop and noted the questionable points. But as she typed the third line, a window popped up on the company computer's screen. Ms. Quinn, your data access is being monitored. Please refrain from taking notes outside the system. Zara flinched. She immediately closed her personal laptop. She swallowed hard. So, everything was being monitored, from the document files to her typing behavior. Just then, the door opened. A voice rang out, warmer and lighter than Mason's. "You're the new one." "Right." A young man with strange grey-blue eyes stood leaning against the doorframe. No suit, no tie, completely different from everyone else here. "I'm Darian Quinn, Leonard's younger brother, but around here, people call me the Discordant One." Zara stood up, flustered. "Zara Quinn? No relation." "Interesting." He smiled lightly. "Two Quinns working on a sensitive negotiation. Outsiders looking in would probably think it's a family conspiracy." Darian's gaze fell on the pile of technical documents on the table. "The Liang Tech project, I've seen that stuff before, but I've never been allowed to touch it. Leonard guards it like a treasure." Zara was curious. "So what do you do in the company?" "I'm the person Leonard doesn't want here." He shrugged. "But my father left me shares, so he's forced to tolerate my existence." Zara realized beneath the charming exterior was a man carrying a lot of pain and perhaps a lot of answers. Before leaving, Darian tilted his head, his gaze turning sharp. "You're a smart woman, Zara. Don't let anyone teach you to obey in silence. The closer you get to Leonard, the more you need to know how to protect yourself." He left, leaving her alone, and with a vague feeling that in this maze there were outsiders still watching silently, quietly, but who might hold the key to the truth. That evening, Zara returned to her small apartment, her mind still reeling from Darian's warning. The closer you get to Leonard, the more you need to know how to protect yourself. She sat down on the sofa, opening her personal laptop to continue reviewing the translations. But then something else caught her eye. The old wooden box her mother always kept in the corner of the closet. A place for storing items no one was allowed to touch. Tonight, she needed answers. Zara opened the box. Inside were a few letters, her birth certificate, and a small photograph so old that the colors had faded. but still clear enough to make her freeze. In the photo was her mother, nearly 30 years younger, smiling radiantly in the arms of a man of Asian descent, his face slightly turned, a pair of round glasses, and his eyes bright with joy. They were standing in front of a building with a sign that read, Quinn Financial Holdings. In the corner of the photo was her mother's handwriting, 1999, the day he signed his first contract. Zara held the photo, her heart pounding. This man, her father. But according to what her mother had told her, he died in a car accident when she was only 5 years old. The problem was, the name Quinn Financial Holdings, it was the predecessor to today's Quinn Group. And what was more haunting, the man in the photo looked so much like Mr. Liang, the mysterious CEO of Liang Tech, whom Zara had just seen on a video call that morning. He always sat in the shadows, wore glasses, spoke with a Beijing accent. But that jawline, that smile, even the way he nodded, why did it look so strangely familiar? A possibility sliced through her thoughts like a knife. What if the father who had died wasn't really dead? What if he had never left her and her mother, but was forced to leave? The phone vibrated, a text from an unknown number, which only said, I need to see you. East Garden, 9 a.m. tomorrow, alone. No signature, no explanation. Zara placed the photograph on the table, her heart tightening. If this was a trap, she could lose everything. But if she didn't go, she would never know the truth. She picked up her phone, took a picture of the photograph, and sent it to the only person she trusted right now, Darian Quinn. With the message, you once said I should protect myself. So, can you help me verify who this man is? Less than a minute later, a reply came. Meet me before you go anywhere. I have information you should know about your mother's past, and a name that was once erased from the Quinn Group's system. Zara looked out the window. The city was as bustling as if nothing had happened, but on a deeper level, where files were locked and memories were hidden, a secret was reawakening. A man once declared dead, a mother once falsely accused, and a girl standing between two generations, carrying the key to dismantle the entire machine of lies. The next morning, it was raining lightly. The drops tapped on the window pane like a vague warning. Zara put on a long, dark coat, tied her hair back neatly, and brought an empty USB drive, just in case. She wasn't going to East Garden as the message had instructed, at least not yet. Instead, she went straight to Quinn Tower. But she didn't go up to the 47th floor as usual. She took the elevator down to the basement, where the corporation's physical records were stored. A place that, according to Darian, few people have visited since the era of digitalization. Zara knew her employee ID card didn't have sufficient access to the confidential archives. But Darian had sent her an oversight in the system, a temporary code that would unlock the door for 15 minutes. The heavy metal door swung open. No one was inside, no cameras, no motion-activated lights, just large filing cabinets arranged like a labyrinth. Zara quickly scanned each section. Accounting, human resources, Special Projects, Legacy Archives. She stopped at the accounting 1995-2005 cabinet, the exact period her mother had worked at Quinn Financial Holdings. The cabinet was stubborn, but it finally yielded. Inside, she found a file with a name on it. Helen Quinn, Senior Financial Analyst, 1998-2003. Inside were excellent performance reviews, quarterly bonuses for each year, and finally, a termination order with no clear reason. But attached was a copy of a financial investigation report with a line in red ink suspected of embezzling $31 million, case being transferred to legal. Zara froze. Her mother, the woman so frugal she would refold tea bags to use a second time, was accused of misappropriating tens of millions. Beneath the file was a collection of old newspaper clippings stapled together. Financial scandal, rocks, Quinn. Financial, CEO, Kenneth Quinn, dies of heart attack shortly after event. Kenneth Quinn, Leonard and Darian's father, the founder of the corporation. Zara continued to flip through the file. A small, brown paper envelope with no sender's name. Inside was a copy of a document titled Operation Green Lotus, 2003, Security Level 1, approved by G. Mason Blake. The last line sent a chill down her spine. List of personnel for soft removal due to access to sensitive information. 1. Helen Quinn, Accounting Department. 2. Y. Fang, International Financial Advisor, temporary. 3. Encrypted account FQ 1312. Cayman Holdings, to be handled before Q4 to 2003. Y. Fang. The name was unmistakable. Zara stepped back, gasping for breath. Her mother and the man in the photograph on the same list for soft removal, and the one who signed off on it, Mason Blake, Leonard's current right-hand man. Just then, a familiar, deep voice echoed from the end of the hallway. I had a feeling you would find your way here. Zara turned around. Mason Blake stood there, his hands in his coat pockets, his expression not angry, but quiet, ice cold. There's a reason these files were never digitized, he said, taking slow steps forward. Because there are some names that shouldn't be spoken again. Zara clutched the USB drive in her pocket. What did you do to my mother? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. Mason just smirked. The better question is, how far are you willing to go to keep her safe? She understood immediately. This was no longer an investigation into the truth. This was a battle, and in it, every piece of the puzzle she found was a declaration of war. That afternoon, East Garden was drenched in a light mist. The flower beds were perfectly trimmed as if nothing had ever been out of place. But Zara felt like she was the only misplaced piece in that picture. She arrived on time, carrying nothing but her phone, her wallet, and the old photograph of her mother and the man with the strange smile. Beneath a canopy of deep red maple trees, a man was already waiting, salt and pepper hair, tall, a light grey suit, not overly luxurious, but just enough to not draw attention. He was looking at the surface of the pond, where koi fish swam silently in circles. Zara, he said, His voice was as light as the wind, but it carried a deep tone that made her stop in her tracks. "You don't remember me, but I have remembered every moment of your life for the past 20 years. Zara stood still, as if mesmerized. Every fiber of her heart vibrated at once. "Who are you?" The man turned around. His eyes, dark brown, profound, looked strangely like hers. "My name is Yun Fang, and I am your father." Zara took a step back. The wind blew gently, but her heart was in turmoil like a storm. "No, my father is dead. A car accident. My mother has a death certificate. There was a funeral." Yun Fang nodded slightly, not arguing. Instead, he pulled a photograph from his jacket pocket, Zara as a 3-year-old child, sitting on his shoulders, her arms wrapped around his neck, giggling. "I have watched your every step, from a distance, silently." "Why?" Her voice broke. "Why did you abandon us?" His face fell, as if carrying thousands of tons of ash from the past. 20 years ago, I was an independent financial analyst, hired to investigate shady transactions in several corporations. Among them was Quinn Financial, where your mother worked as a senior accountant. She discovered illegal money transfers. At the same time, I also found a sophisticated money laundering network involving Kenneth Quinn himself. Zara shivered. That name appeared again, Leonard and Darian's father, the man revered as the corporation's founding legend. When I was preparing to report the case to the federal government, Yun Fang continued, "We received an anonymous envelope. Inside was a picture of you and your mother, taken through your house window, and a single message: silence or goodbye." Zara could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. "And you chose to run away, no?" he said, his eyes never leaving hers. "I chose to die, at least on paper. I faked the accident, changed my identity, and fled to Shanghai, changed my name, rebuilt from scratch, and started doing the only thing I could do: collect evidence, piece by piece, year by year, so that one day I could return and clear your mother's name." Zara burst into tears, unable to stop them. "My mother, she never said a word about you. Never. Because she wanted to protect you from the pain, and from the people who were willing to do anything to keep the secret." He handed her a small USB drive. "In here is the original Green Lotus file, unedited, along with evidence of bank accounts, Kenneth Quinn's signature, and Mason Blake's as well." Zara took it, her hands trembling. What she had read this morning was nothing compared to this. "Why now?" she asked. "Because Quinn Group is about to sign a deal with Liang Tech, the company I founded after leaving the U.S. Leonard thinks he's negotiating with some obscure Chinese-born CEO. But the truth is..." He paused for a beat, looking straight at her. "They are negotiating with the father they once tried to eliminate." That night, Zara's small apartment was shrouded in a suffocating silence. The light from her laptop screen cast a glow on her face, pale, quiet, and trembling from everything she had just learned. Before her were 3 choices, and each choice came with an immeasurable price. The first side Leonard Quinn, the man who had brought her into the corporation, given her a job, an opportunity, but also the head of a family that had built an empire on blood money, fraud, and deception. While he might not have committed the crimes directly, he was protecting his father's past, and Mason Blake, the man who had put her mother's name on the soft removal list. The second side, Dr. Knox, the man who controlled her mother's life with the push of a button. Every time he texted, "Need new information." Zara felt as if her mother's oxygen line was being tightened another notch. The third side, her biological father, Yun Fang, who had returned from the past with the promise to expose everything. But he was also the man who had abandoned her for 20 years, leaving her mother to struggle alone, making her childhood synonymous with unpaid bills and dreams that never materialized. And she, Zara Quinn, who hadn't chosen to enter this fight, but was now being pushed into its central role. The sound of a text message cut through her thoughts. "Darian Quinn, are you okay? I just found the name Fang in the internal financial consultant records from 2003, erased from the system, but it has Mason's fingerprints on it. We need to talk, urgently," Zara typed back, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "I met him. It's real. He's my father." A minute later, Darian called directly. "Zara, listen to me," he said, breathing heavily. "If he really is Yun Fang, then this is no longer a company internal matter. This is international money laundering. And Quinn Group is on the brink," Zara whispered. "I know. Leonard isn't a bad guy," Darian added. "He always thought his father was innocent, but if he finds out the truth, I'm not sure which side he'll be on." "So what about you?" Zara asked directly. "Which side are you on?" Darian hesitated. Then, "Honestly, I'm on the side of the truth, and on your side." Less than an hour later, Zara received a call from Leonard. "Zara," his voice was low and urgent, "we need to meet. Alone." "I know. Something's wrong. You're not the same as when you first joined. What's going on?" Zara swallowed hard. Her heart was pounding. She no longer had the strength to lie completely, but she couldn't tell the truth either. "I just feel so small in the middle of all these things that are bigger than me," she whispered. "I understand." Leonard said, "We're going to Beijing tomorrow, but tonight there's a private meeting. I want you there. They're going to announce the first step of the agreement. Can I refuse? No," Leonard said softly. "Because if you're not there, other people will start asking questions, and I don't want anyone to hurt you." He hung up. Zara sat back on her bed, her mind blank. 3 directions, 3 promises, 3 pulling forces. But she only had one fracturing heart, and one choice: continue to be a pawn or become the one who flips the board. She opened her phone and texted her father, "Internal meeting tonight. This could be when they make the final decision. Are you ready?" The reply from the other side: I've been ready for 20 years. Unlike the tense meetings in closed rooms with white lights, the strategy dinner was held in a private dining room on the 60th floor of Quinn Tower, where warm golden light mingled with the sparkling view of Chicago at night through a glass wall. Zara wore a simple black dress, walking slowly behind Leonard. She saw that Mason Blake was already seated at the head of the table, next to two legal representatives and a sharp-looking blonde woman whose eyes seemed to measure everyone's every breath. Victoria Lang, Chief Strategy Officer of Blackstone Capital, Quinn Group's largest investor, and Leonard's former fiancée.
"Zara Quinn," Victoria said, her smile as thin as a paper cut. "Your name sounds very on-brand."
Zara nodded slightly, maintaining a neutral expression. Leonard quickly regained control, signaling for the food to be served. He didn't have Zara sit next to him, but deliberately placed her opposite Mason Blake. In the flickering candlelight and the clinking of glasses, Zara felt as if she were sitting at a chessboard. Everyone here was a piece, but no one was saying anything directly. "The deal with Liang Tech is nearly finalized," Mason said, his voice as low and steady as someone who already knew the outcome. "We've cross-referenced the English and Chinese versions of the contract. The translation is very subtle." His eyes flickered to Zara, the implication clear. "Thank you," she replied. "I only translated what was given to me." "Exactly," Victoria interjected, pouring more wine. "And sometimes, accuracy is the fastest way to create a discrepancy, if one wants to." That sentence was like a needle piercing the glass between them. Zara remained calm, but she felt her heart clench. She knew they were suspicious, or worse, they already knew. Leonard spoke up, breaking the silence. "In any case, the press conference for the joint venture with Liang Tech will take place in 72 hours, and I want everyone here to reaffirm their loyalty." Everyone nodded. Mason sipped his wine. Victoria smiled. But no one answered out loud. The entire table fell into a strange silence. Zara looked at Leonard. He didn't turn to her, but his hand under the table lightly touched her leg. Not a gesture of affection, but a signal. "Hold on. I know you're scared." After dinner, Mason invited Zara out to the hallway. No one else was there, just the two of them standing by the railing, looking down at the brilliant city. "Zara," he said, "you're very smart, and I trust you understand how the people in that room play the game." She didn't answer. "So I'll be direct," Mason continued. "I know you've been through the files. I know what you're holding, but you should know. People with the Quinn name don't live long if they don't know when to be quiet." Zara turned, looking him straight in the eye. She couldn't tremble anymore, couldn't be threatened anymore. "And you should know," she replied, "that those who were once removed sometimes come back, and they remember very clearly who pushed the button first." Mason raised an eyebrow slightly, a flicker of surprise, but then he returned to his cold demeanor. "We'll see how far you have the guts to go." That night, when she got home, Zara opened her laptop. She sent a copy of all the files from the USB her father had given her, along with the English translation, to an encrypted Dropbox account set up by Darian. She knew time was running out. A message from Darian arrived shortly after I've sent the file to a federal lawyer. But if you want to expose Mason, you need living proof. A voice, a threat, a slip-up. Zara looked at the screen. A voice. She remembered the conversation in the hallway earlier. She had turned on her voice recorder before stepping out. She pressed play, and Mason's voice came through the speaker, clear and distinct. People with the Quinn name don't live long if they don't know when to be quiet. The Quinn Group's private jet lifted off the runway at 2:10 a.m. The night sky outside the window was dark and hazy, just like the feeling wrapping around Zara's chest. Leonard sat next to her, his coat draped over his shoulder, holding a file, but his eyes never left her furrowed brow. In the quiet cabin, there was only the steady hum of the engines and a cup of untouched tea. "Do you want to get some sleep?" he asked, his voice gentle. Zara shook her head slightly. She didn't dare close her eyes, not while Mason Blake was still watching her every move. Not while Victoria Lang was also on the same flight, despite having no official role in the negotiating team, and especially not when her father, Yun Fang, the founder of Liang Tech, was waiting at their destination. Zara could no longer distinguish between the target and the trap. About an hour later, when everyone seemed to have drifted into intermittent sleep, Zara opened her laptop and put on her headphones. She played the recording of her conversation with Mason one more time. His steady voice echoed, "You're very smart, but sometimes being smart is what makes people disappear sooner." Another voice suddenly came through the headphones, Leonard's voice, quiet. From the seat beside her. "What are you planning to do with that recording?" Zara flinched, took off her headphones, and turned to him. He still had his eyes closed, but the smile at the corner of his mouth revealed the truth. Leonard wasn't asleep. You heard that she asked. "You don't have to hear it clearly to know you're fighting against someone." He opened his eyes, tilting his head to look at her. "The question is, whose side are you on?" Zara hesitated. "I'm looking for the truth." Leonard nodded. "Then I'll tell you my side of the story." He sat up straight and took an old photograph from his jacket pocket, tattered with time. In the photo was Kenneth Quinn, Leonard's father, shaking hands with an Asian man. That man was none other than Yun Fang. Zara was speechless. "Your father used to be my father's close friend," Leonard said, "until he disappeared, and my father became a different person, colder, more ruthless." He looked directly into her eyes. "I don't know if your father really broke the law, or if he was just turned into a pawn, but I've always suspected that Mason knew more than he let on." Zara whispered. "You don't trust Mason. I used to see him as a mentor," Leonard replied, "until I realized anyone who dared to ask the wrong questions was eliminated, silenced, vanished." Zara clenched her fists. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place. "So, what if you knew my father was still alive?" Leonard frowned. "You just confirmed that. No anger, no shock, just a slight smile. a mix of astonishment and relief. We've been negotiating with Liang Tech without knowing that the man on the other side of the table is the very person Quinn Group once betrayed. Leonard said softly, "Perhaps now is the time for things to be set right." Zara nodded slightly. "If we still have time." 2 hours later, the plane landed at Beijing Capital International Airport in a hazy mist. The cabin door opened to greet them with cold white light and a discreet motorcade. Waiting for them was a man with salt and pepper hair, wearing thin sunglasses, but Zara couldn't mistake his smile. Yun Fang. When his and Leonard's eyes met, they both stood in silence for a few seconds. Then Yun Fang stepped forward, extending his hand. "Leonard Quinn," he said in perfect English. "It's been a long time." Leonard didn't hesitate. He shook his hand, his gaze steady. "Perhaps it's time to talk about everything that was never said." Zara stood between the two men, one of her blood, the other her choice. And she knew tonight there would be no more room for lies. The meeting room on the 53rd floor of Liang Tech's headquarters in Beijing was designed with a minimalist yet sharp aesthetic. A long glass table, a pristine white lighting system, and ink wash paintings hung along the walls as if to remind everyone that here, tradition and power went hand in hand. Zara sat beside Leonard, and on the opposite side was the Liang Tech delegation, led by a man in dark glasses with a sharp gaze, Mr. Zhang, the executive vice president. But the person everyone was truly waiting for had not yet appeared. The door swung open. Yun Fang, or Mr. Liang, as he was currently known, walked in, his face calm. But every step he took carried the weight of 2 decades of waiting. Zara could feel the atmosphere in the room change instantly. Leonard stood up. "Sir," he nodded. "We greatly appreciate your personal presence today." Yun Fang nodded slightly. "I think it's time we talk not just about technology, but also about the truth." Mason Blake was present. So was Victoria Lang. They sat in the back, near the legal team. From her position, Zara could clearly see Victoria's face gradually tensing up. She knew something was coming, but she couldn't guess from which direction. Yun Fang opened his leather briefcase and took out a thick file. He didn't hand it to anyone, just placed it on the table, in front of everyone. "Before we sign any contract," he said, "perhaps we should review some historical documents. Documents that were once buried, now restored to their original state." Mason shot to his feet. "This is outside the scope of the agenda. I object." "Objection noted." Yun Fang cut him off, but not accepted. Leonard signaled for Mason to sit down. "I want to hear this." Zara opened her laptop and connected the file Darian had sent her that morning, the audio recording of Mason's threat. She pressed play. In the silent room, Mason's low, steady voice echoed clearly. "People with the Quinn name don't live long if they don't know when to be quiet." A deadly silence. Victoria stood up, her face ashen. "This is illegal." Leonard turned to her, for the first time with an expression as sharp as a blade. Silence has helped you survive all this time, but today the truth will expose you. Yun Fang continued. He presented a summary of the documents, an underground money transfer account under the name FQ1312, signed by Kenneth Quinn and Mason Blake. A list of personnel for soft removal, which included Helen Quinn, Zara's mother. Illegal transactions between Quinn Group and a shell company in the Cayman Islands, once used to launder tens of millions of dollars. Zara felt as if she were reliving every night her mother held her to sleep without daring to turn on the lights, as if the darkness was the safest thing they had left. Everyone looked at Leonard, waiting for his reaction. He stood up, took a deep breath. As the current CEO of Quinn Group, he declared, "I confirm that this evidence is valid, and I am prepared to cooperate with the U.S. authorities as well as our international partners to conduct a full investigation into all of the corporation's financial activities over the past 20 years. Victoria slumped into her chair, stunned. Mason said nothing. His eyes stared at Zara as if he wanted to burn her soul. "This will end your career," he growled at Leonard. "No," Leonard replied. "It will restart it on a clean foundation." The meeting concluded without a single contract being signed. Zara stepped out onto the high-rise balcony, where the Beijing wind whipped across her face, as if wanting to wash everything away. But the feelings remained intact, trembling. Exhaustion, but also relief. Leonard came to her side, holding the unsigned contract. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "The recording, the confrontation, all of it." Zara looked him straight in the eye. "I had to, not just for my mother, but for myself. I don't want to live in fear anymore." He nodded, gently taking her hand. From a distance, her father, Yun Fang, watched the two of them, his gaze pensive. He had lost so much, but today he had regained the most precious thing a truth brought to light, and a daughter who was no longer afraid of the dark. 1 year later, at a small cemetery on the outskirts of Chicago, Zara knelt before a brand-new headstone, carved from white marble. Helen Quinn, a mother, a silent warrior, who taught us that silence can protect, but only the truth can truly set you free. She placed a bouquet of white tulips, her mother's favorite flower, on the gravestone. Her hand trembled slightly, but her expression was steady. Beside her, Leonard stood in silence, his hand on her shoulder, gentle and warm. Nearby, Yun Fang, Zara's father, said nothing. He simply stood behind them, just as he had for 20 years, watching silently, not seeking forgiveness, only waiting for the day he could step into the light. After the shocking press conference in Beijing, media outlets in America, Europe, and Asia all ran the story. Quinn Group admits to historical wrongdoing. New CEO pledges full restructuring. Mason Blake indicted. Victoria Lang, granted immunity for cooperation with investigation. Yun Fang, the man who returned from the dead, testifies before Congress on cross-border money laundering ring. Leonard Quinn temporarily stepped down during the investigation, transferring operational control to Darian, his younger brother, who had once been sidelined, but was the one who had persistently followed every trail in the dark. Zara, with the support of Leonard and her father, established the Helen Quinn Foundation, providing language scholarships and cardiac treatment for the underprivileged who lacked access to the barrier-filled healthcare system. At the new Quinn Group headquarters, where all the walls had been torn down and light flooded in from every direction, Leonard and Zara walked into the boardroom meeting. In Zara's hands was the development plan for an international center for financial justice, in partnership with her father's organization in Shanghai. "Today," Leonard said, "we are not here to protect a name. We are here to rebuild an ideal on a clean foundation built from the truth." Everyone applauded, and in a corner of the room, Yun Fang watched his daughter present, his eyes glistening with tears, though not a single one fell. It had taken him 20 years to return. And now, he didn't need to say anything more. Zara had rewritten the story for him. That evening, standing on the balcony, looking out at the city, now bright after the storm, Zara placed a hand on her stomach, where a tiny heartbeat was forming. Leonard came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Our child," he whispered. "He or she will grow up in the light, without the legacy of lies." Zara nodded slightly. "And if one day our child asks, 'Mom, were you ever afraid?' what will you say?" She smiled, her eyes shimmering. "I would say, 'Mum was afraid, but she stopped running because she chose to face it, chose the light, chose the truth.'" And in the fading night, as the first light of a new day dawned, Helen's voice seemed to echo in her heart. "Truth may arrive late, but it always arrives on time. We cannot choose where we are born, but we can choose how we live. No longer afraid of the dark, no longer silent. Only one thing remains to be preserved: the truth. Some truths take 20 years to find. Some losses can never be compensated. But there are also those who, despite being buried by silence, still choose to stand up, because justice does not come from a shout, but from a gentle persistence that never gives up. If you are living in darkness, believe this: the light is always waiting at the end of the road.